Welcome, FNews57 here. I'm back on my Xbox One playing Remnant From the Ashes, and today's video will be a beginner's guide with some tips and tricks to hopefully help you in your journey through Remnant From the Ashes. Now, this video I hope will help even experienced players, but is designed for new players to the game. So I've been playing this game now since I was given a review copy for a while. I've got several days of playtime, and I'd just like to kind of share some helpful pointers, hopefully get you guys started on the right track. Now, I should mention the very first thing, once you go through and do the couple starting quests, the tutorial, and you get to Ward 13, it will have you activate this crystal, and then you have to go to the Hunter's Hideout, which is where I'm at right now. In that process, you are going to have to choose a archetype. It does not matter the archetype that you choose, so don't worry about that too much. The only thing that it will give you is your starting weapons, your starting basically secondary, primary, a melee weapon, and then of course your starting armor set, and it will also give you a unique trait. However, the weapons can be purchased from the vendor, and the traits can be unlocked in other RNG-based dungeons, so don't worry too much about that, but I would recommend that you pick one that kind of fits your playstyle to start with. For me, my favorite is the ex-cultist, so I chose that character for the gear and for the trait spirit. You also get a weapon modification that allows you to heal. Now, a few things about this game. It is a randomly generated game world, so while the cities will be the same, you will come out at different points in the city, and the dungeons, enemies, dungeon bosses, and things like that that you fight will be randomized. So take your time going through the world. You can open the map and see what your quest is. You can also see where you have been on the map, because it will be a discovered area, and you will see where you have not been. Now, once you understand that, you're going to want to worry about getting some different items. So I will break down the basics of the items for you. Most wooden items like that can be busted by either meleeing them or by shooting them with a ranged weapon. Now, there are several basic currencies. The main currency in this game is scrap. As you can see, I just picked up some. You can check that by going into your inventory. The first tab you will see is consumables, then you will see materials, and lastly you will see quest items. Down at the bottom in the right hand corner you will see your balance of scrap. Scrap is the currency that you use in this game to buy materials from vendors. You use it to pay the cost to upgrade your weapons and armor. You use it to pay the cost of buying resources and consumables. You basically use it for everything. It's the money of this game. Now, consumables are broken down into two separate categories. There is the regular consumables, which can be purchased from a vendor back in Ward 13, and from random world vendors as you progress through the game and unlock them. Those are things like adrenaline, which makes you move faster and melee attack faster, ammo boxes that replenish your ammo, which are super useful for certain boss fights, bandages that stop the bleeding effect, the bloodwort, which is a healing potion, erythral orb, I don't think I said that right, but this one prevents the overload effect and removes it. Frenzy Dust, which speeds up your reload. Green Leaf, it's less common, but you find it in a later area. It's used to remove the corroded effect. Heavy Water Elixir, which is used to remove the irradiated effect. And the Oil Skin Tonic, which is used to remove the infected status effect. And then you have the less common items that can only be purchased from certain vendors in the game, like Divine Nectar, which increases armor effectiveness, Golden Plums that give you health regen, Houndmaster's Jerky, that increases your critical hit damage. Mudtooth Stew, that increases your stamina, and Mudtooth Tonic, that increases your maximum health. And then lastly, once you have beaten the game, you can get an item called the Orb of Undoing, which gives you the ability to redo all of your trait points. I'll cover those in a second. Then you have materials. Now these are your basic upgrade materials. The first level is iron. The second level is forged iron. The third is galvanized iron. And the fourth is hardened iron. Boss weapons will also take luminite crystal to upgrade, and it does take luminite crystal to craft weapon mods as well as upgrading your dragonstone, which is your healing item. In order to get the final level on any weapon or armor and to upgrade your dragonstone, you will need this simulacrum, or however you pronounce that item as well, which is probably the rarest item to find in the world. And then, of course, quest items go in their own tab. Now, like I said, I would cover traits. Traits are basically your skills. Every time you level up, you get a trait point. There's also a couple other ways to get trait points. You can get trait points by finding a Tome of Knowledge in the open world, which gives you a free trait point, or you can get a trait point by doing something in your game or in someone else's game that would reward you with a trait, but you already have that trait, so instead it gives you a free trait point. Now, you see I have a ton of different traits. You can unlock all the traits. There's about 35 traits that people have found so far in the game, but you will only start with 3 traits. You will start with Vigor, Endurance, the trait specific to your archetype that you picked, and that's it. I will show you how to get the Elder Knowledge trait very early on, so technically you can get 4 traits right away, and Elder Knowledge is an excellent trait because of the fact it gives you more XP gain, which means you'll level up faster, which means you'll get more trait points, and you'll be able to fill out the rest of the traits that you pick up. A lot of traits like teamwork are simply unlocked by joining another person's world or having someone else join yours, and then other ones like Mother's Blessing, let me go find it down here, Kingslayer, Mind's Eye, those type of ones are unlocked just playing through the story. Certain ones are unlocked for maxing out weapons. If you plus 20 a ranged weapon, you get Trigger Happy. If you plus 20 a melee weapon, you get Rapid Strike. And then there's other ones that you have to do specific quests or specific puzzles for, like Bark Skin, Swiftness, things like that. But you can get a ton of different traits, and you can level them up to a maximum of 20 per individual trait. I recommend when you start the game spreading your points relatively evenly depending on your playstyle between Vigor, Endurance, Spirit if you have it. I highly recommend that trait, and Elder Knowledge. Maybe a little bit more to Elder Knowledge than Spirit and Endurance, just so that you can get those trait points faster. Alright, so I've covered your inventory. I've covered your traits. We'll take a look at your weapons and gear. Obviously, you're going to start with the repeater pistol, but I will show you how to get the submachine gun extremely early on, which is a decent weapon to run around with if you don't like the repeater pistol. Depending on the archetype you'll choose, you'll either have the hunting rifle, the coach gun, or the shotgun as your primary. This is what takes long gun ammo. And then, of course, you can get these various boss weapons, which require you to find a specific fragment to make them. And they all start at level 1. Melee weapons are up to you. You'll either start with the scrap hammer, scrap hatchet, or scrap sword. They're all decent, but eventually you will end up switching to one of the boss weapons. Your armor set is entirely up to you. And then it's entirely up to you what amulet and rings you use. Those you will find randomly in the open world. So now that we covered that, let's cover loot in the open world. If you want to play co-op, Don't worry, any item that you pick up, so I just picked up an oilskin tonic, if I had another player in my world, they would also get the oilskin tonic. It works that way for almost every single item in the game and all certain traits, except for a handful of items and traits that only one player at a time can get, like the bark skin trait or the cold as ice trait, if you get those specific encounters. As a tip for anyone new, when you come to this room and you pick up the Ward 13 keycard, make sure that you destroy that filing cabinet, go under here. All these breakable items can be destroyed. There's a lore book there if you care about it. But there's going to be a piece of iron for you. And there will be a set that you can get, an armor set, right off the bat. It's not the best armor, but you might as well pick it up. Now, I highly recommend that you go back to Ward 13, and I'm going to show you how to get the Elder Knowledge trait and the submachine gun. I do have a specific video on that. While we are waiting for this loading screen, though, I do want to recommend to you that you watch your ammo, especially if you're playing in co-op, because ammo is not shared. It is the one resource in the game that will not share between teammates. So whoever picks up the ammo is the one that gets it. White boxes are your handgun ammo, so your secondary weapon. Red boxes are your primary weapon or your long gun ammo. When they say long gun, they mean handgun. Well, they mean basically rifle, shotgun, things like that. There is one submachine gun that falls into that category called the Chicago typewriter. Alright, so let's review the NPCs. If you played the tutorial, then you know that the engineer, which is this person right here, you can talk to them and you can craft. Basically, if you have any boss materials, when you kill a boss, they give you a certain material depending on how you killed them. You can come back here and either craft the weapon or the weapon mod that it makes. If you want to upgrade an item, you simply talk to this individual right here, and you can go ahead and upgrade any of your items that you have. If you go to the buy items category, he will have the other armor and the other weapons for the archetypes that you did not choose. Lastly, we'll look at if you press X on a weapon that's not a boss weapon, it has a mod slot. Depending on what bosses you kill and the manner that you kill them, you can get a whole assortment of different weapon mods. They all have different effects. Some summon creatures, some deal damage. Some, like Mender's Aura, allow you to create a healing pool. So you'll have to adjust those based on your play style and what you like at the time. Don't worry if something isn't working out for you. You can try something else. You can freely change those weapon mods. They are charged up by dealing damage to an enemy, or if you have like Spirit or the Guardian's Axe or something like that, there's different things that can affect the charge rate. This NPC here you'll get later in the quest, but this is the Root Mother, and she's the NPC that allows you to upgrade your Dragon Heart. As you can see in the bottom right hand corner, I have 10 charges on my Dragon Heart, which is the most that you can have. I do recommend that you make sure you break everything in Ward 13 because you will need all of the wonderful stuff that comes from there. There's a lot of consumables and things that you can get. Now, in here, because I've already done this in my world, I'm not allowed to get another copy, but this door will be shut. Come up, interact with it, and it'll prompt you to use the Ward 13 keycard. There will be a Tome of Knowledge right there, so that's a free trait point. And there's a lot of breakable items in here, so make sure you break all of them. And then there will be consumables in each one of these rooms, but you're going to come here and click on that recorder. After it starts playing for a couple seconds, you will get the Elder Knowledge trait. And just check each one of the rooms. There'll be various items in these rooms. What you want to do, though, once you have the key, you'll need the key for this next step. but I'm going to show you the door since it's already open in my world. This is the office. There'll be a couple little things in here, and the submachine gun will be on this table for you to pick up. But you do need the key to get that. So I'm going to show you, in one of those rooms we passed, there will be a fuse. You pick up the fuse. Now that is an item that sometimes other people in your game can't pick up. Only the host can pick up. You will take the fuse and run down to the B3 floor, which is the research floor. Insert the fuse in this fuse box and then turn the power on. Moving to this door and keycard reader. Use your keycard to unlock the door, then open the door. Come back and turn off the power, which will stop the fan, allowing you to run over here, run past the fan blade, and this is where you will pick up the key. It'll be on this table right there. That allows you to go back upstairs, unlock the door that I was just at, and pick up the submachine gun. So that's how you get that particular item if you wish to have another weapon outside of your pistol when you start the game. Lastly, you can turn the power back on so it's easier to see and come in these rooms. In this particular room, there will be a line of chairs on each one of these rows, which you can go ahead and just smash. Make sure you smash those, all of them, and then come down through here, through this little door, and there will be another Tome of Knowledge down there. Plus there will be a consumable right here behind the door, which in my case it was an ammo box. And that's everything that you can get for now in Ward 13. Now I will show you a little bit of gameplay from the game, just so you get an idea for how the mechanics work. On your very first playthrough, the enemies will be a little bit more difficult until you get geared. This game is designed to give you a challenge, and it will give you a challenge, especially if you're not careful. So make sure that you break everything, take your time, do all the dungeons. Feel free to come back to the ward at any point, upgrade your gear. If a certain weapon isn't working for you, try a different weapon. Try the different weapon mods. If you have any questions, just ask, and I will do my best to answer them for you. I have a ton of guides for this game. There will also be breakable items in that corner, some in that corner, some in that corner. Basically, you can get a couple thousand scrap for free just by doing that. Now, before I travel and show you the actual game, I want to show you two vendors. There is this gentleman right here. This is the one that I talked about that sells the consumables. Now, since I've played through the game, I have all these varying consumables. You will probably only have like those 4 consumables available to purchase at the start of the game. And then this NPC over here sells materials. Now they'll have different materials based on how far you've gotten in the game. When you start, they'll only have iron, and then eventually they'll have forged iron, galvanized iron, hardened iron, and even on a rare occasion, it is possible for them to have luminite crystal. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started in the game. I think that covers most of the basics. Obviously, if I missed something, just feel free to leave a comment or send me a message, and I will do my best to answer for you. Hopefully the video helps you out as well. If it does, all I ask is you just leave a like on it and share it with a friend, as that greatly helps me out with the searchability of videos here on YouTube. So, shameless plug. Now, the loading screens can take a bit of time, and this game has had a lot of glitches in it, so do keep that in mind. They have fixed most of them, but there are still a few glitches that exist in the game. Hopefully they will be fixed soon. One of them is the 2 achievements. So if you're an achievement hunter like I am, the collect 100,000 scrap and collect 200,000 scrap, those are currently not tracking properly at the time of recording, but hopefully they will fix those. So as I said initially, the enemies are going to be tougher there really isn't a point in sneaking. You can kind of sneak to dodge the enemies a little bit, but you will have to fight them eventually. If you press the picture-in-picture button, you can pull up your map, and you have a little larger version of the map. I wish we could zoom in on it. You'll notice the bright gray area is the area that we have been to, and the darkened area is obviously the area that we have not been to. So if you're ever lost, check your map, see what the quest says, and then go towards the area that is blacked out and you have not actually been to. So the first enemies that you're going to fight are going to be these little basic roots. Their face is their weak point. Now, I can kind of one-shot these guys simply because, well, I've got a lot of stuff maxed out. But if you can't one-shot them, which depending on your weapon you probably will not be able to do, then I recommend you shoot them and then melee them, because you can actually stagger them when you hit them depending on what weapon you're using. It's also a good idea to engage their weak point whenever possible, because you'll do more damage to them. Almost every enemy in the game has a weak point, but not every single one does. It's a little bit of a spoiler, but there is actually a trait for getting 150 kills by shooting enemies in their weak point. Now, it's a little bit buggy because it does have to be done all on one world. It does not count for other players' worlds, so if you join a friend, you can't make progress on that trait there. And if you re-roll your world, it will re-roll the progress. Now, this is one of the little long gun ammo boxes, so just note that. And when I said smash everything for resources, I meant it. All the breakable items you want to hit. If you don't have a lot of dragon hearts or health stones, then you're going to want to kind of play defensively so you don't lose too much health. You'll also find these gates periodically, where you cannot open them from one side, but you can open them from the other side. And what you'll have to do is you'll have to do a dungeon, and then you'll come out on the other side of the map. In each world, there will be multiple dungeons. One that you must do, one that is just an extra. You can do it if you want to do it, but you don't have to do it. Every dungeon will be different, have different loot, have different bosses, and it's not necessarily going to give you the same dungeon or the same boss if you re-roll your world, or even if you play in like a friend's world. So you'll start encountering different types of enemies, and depending on the type of enemy, they will be able to apply a status effect to you. Like those archers can apply the bleed status effect. So he just applied the bleed status effect to me, and in order to get rid of that status effect, I have to either use the corresponding consumable, which I have, so I'll go ahead and use that, or you have to rest at a checkpoint. Now, resting at a checkpoint or a crystal will cause all of the enemies to respawn, so keep that in mind. You want to make sure that you come into these buildings, and like I mentioned earlier, I cannot stress enough about destroying every single breakable object that you can possibly get your hands on. Keep in mind that the root like to spawn behind you, and they have kind of a weird dodging pattern, so it can become a little bit frustrating. A lot of stuff is hidden. You'll notice these world items. If you do die and respawn at the checkpoint, those items will not respawn. Or if you reset the world, like resting at a checkpoint on purpose, even though you reset the enemies, the world items will not respawn. The only way to respawn the world items is to re-roll the world. So here is one of those tomes of knowledge that I was talking about. In every dungeon and every area, there will be a tome of knowledge, that glowing blue item that gives you a trait point, and there will be either a quest item or there will be a actual piece of gear. which is going to be a glowing red if it's a quest item, or a glowing purple if it's a regular gear item. Now you've seen several different damage numbers here. I'll explain the damage system real quick. A red number is a weak point hit, a white number is a regular hit, and a yellow number is a critical hit. It is possible to have a critical weak point hit, so just keep that in mind. As I said earlier, it is always worth aiming for the weak point as long as you know that your shot will hit instead of missing. If you're unsure if your shot will hit because of, say, enemies teleporting, then just go for body shots. Once again, that depends on your playstyle, what weapons you have available to you, all of that stuff. And just make sure you pick up everything here. So I'm going to try and show you a dungeon real quick if I can find one. I'm trying to do weak point kills specifically. Upgrading your DPS traits, or anything that allows you to like fire faster, reload faster, do more damage with, ranged weapons, do more damage with melee weapons. Whatever works for your build, you're definitely going to want to upgrade. And it does not look like I am going to find the purple item, but there are these glowing chests, boxes on Earth, chests on other worlds, and you want to make sure that you find those and pick those up or open them, because they always give you a bunch of loot. They can give you consumables, but they will always give you different types of iron, relevant to what your world is set at, and they will also give you scrap, which we've already established you need a lot of scrap. Oh, I actually missed some. Now on Earth there are 2 individual quest items that can spawn. There is an item called a strange coin, which gives you a really nice pistol when you turn it in, and there is a item called a Tarnished Ring. Now the Tarnished Ring is really cool and really good because it gives you the scavenger trait, which allows you to get more scrap from any scrap you pick up. I'm going to go ahead and use a weapon mod. As you can see, I have weapon mods that are already charged. So the mod that I'm using is called Breath of the Desert. It's a straight damage mod. This one is called Swarm, which also is a damage mod, but it seeks targets near you and kills them, or at least does a decent amount of damage to them, depending on what stats you have. And then I have to charge the mod up by dealing damage. I will have a separate video for my actual build, but I'm a high crit mod, like weapon mod, using DPS build. A little bit of a glass cannon though, because I just wear light or medium armor. I don't wear heavy armor. So we should be approaching a dungeon relatively soon. Take your time exploring. Remember, if you do play in co-op, the more players you have, the more difficult the enemies will be. However, the loot will not improve. So it kind of seems like the ideal amount of players when you start the game is 2. Having that extra gun helps, but at the same time, it will make the game harder. So this is a dungeon. It'll be a little glowing light, either in a doorway or, in this case, the sewer. And you're going to go into the dungeon. Now, all players have to be present, either at the crystal when you're traveling or at the actual entrance to the dungeon or next area of the map. Otherwise, you cannot travel. And you will get several traits for playing in co-op. You can get the teamwork trait just for playing in co-op. You will get the revivalist trait for reviving your team members enough times. And you can get suspicion for being killed or being downed by your team members. So once we're in a dungeon, there will be this little checkpoint here. Now it's basically a mini crystal. It functions the same way as the crystals function, with the exception of the travel option is to Ward 13 or leave the dungeon, and you cannot actually fast travel to this crystal unless it was the last checkpoint that you were at. Now when you enter a dungeon, you will have various different like dungeons and bosses and layouts, and you'll enter at different points, so your dungeon will not be necessarily the same as mine, but your end objective is going to be to fight your way to the end through various different types of enemies, and you'll constantly be running into different types of enemies as you progress through the game, making sure that you loot everything and check every corner, because they love to hide little lovely helping items. And of course there will be a tome and a gear piece in here as well. You do have to be very careful of those exploding pink dudes. They do a lot of damage. So there's one of those little consumables just laying there. Free piece of adrenaline. This is what a gear item looks like. Now this is actually really cool because it's the Sagestone Ring. I'll show you what the Sagestone Ring does. It's very good for new players starting out because it functions just like Elder Knowledge, and it gives you bonus experience while you're wearing it by 15%. However, if you pick up a piece of gear that you already have, you will simply gain scrap for it. And those gear pieces function the same way I mentioned earlier. If one person in the world picks it up, all of the players in the world will get it. Do keep in mind that if you are in the open world and somebody joins your game, you will have to go to a crystal or checkpoint to actually spawn that player into the world. Same thing if you die, your teammate will have to go to a crystal to revive you. You can go down but not out, and you can revive your teammates by walking up to them and using one of your charges on your Dragon Heart, but you will have a limited amount of time to do that.
Who's next?
As I mentioned already, just check everywhere. Kind of watch your back in this game. Enemies like to flank. Sometimes there's different types of enemies that can actually teleport. And you have to watch out because they will teleport behind you. There will always be at least one elite enemy in dungeons. Now, it does vary what type of elite enemy. So, like, we have this guy with the machine gun. And I got a trait point. I got a Luminite crystal. You're not guaranteed to get Luminite crystals, but elite enemies have a high chance of dropping them. And there's an oilskin tonic. Again, the loot is different in almost every single dungeon, but you'll find a decent amount of the consumables to get rid of whatever the status effect for that particular world is. So on Earth, the status effect is root rot, which if you become fully infected, you will start having random coughing fits, and that's super annoying because you can't really do anything when you're coughing. There's the Tome of Knowledge. So we got the Tome of Knowledge and the gear piece for this particular dungeon. These enemies aren't too bad to melee because they're relatively weak enemies. Now I heard the sound. Aha, there we go. Here's this guy. He just randomly will show up. He's very annoying because he blocks all damage with his swords from the front. So the only way to damage him is from behind or to run up to him and get him to do an attack. And then you want to try and dodge it. I did not dodge effectively unless you have a weapon mod like Swarm, which will hit them through a forward-facing shield. So as you can see, I just used my Swarm there to make my life easier and kill him.
Ooh, that was rough.
And then we will approach the end of the dungeon. Now, each dungeon is different. Some dungeons have a entry and exit point. Some dungeons have a boss. Some dungeons do not have a boss. If you get a dungeon like this particular one that I have, there is a boss fight at the end, and I'm going to go ahead and show you this particular boss fight. Every boss fight is different. Some boss fights do have alternate ways that you can kill them, which will change the reward item that you get for successfully killing them. But every boss will have one thing in common, and that is that they will have a checkpoint right before the boss where you can rest, refill your dragon heart, refill your ammo. I always recommend going into a boss fight with full weapon mods just because it makes it easier. Even if you only have like a basic healing weapon mod, it will help out. Now this boss is difficult when you first start the game, but eventually as you get upgraded, you'll be able to take him on relatively easy. So I'm going to go ahead and just take him down as fast as possible. But I do want to show you some of his attacks. And of course he summons those little pink exploding ads, and they will just keep running at you. But they have that little whining noise, so it's relatively easy to hear them. And you just want to kind of master your dodge so that you're trying to dodge at the exact time to dodge his attack. If you don't, he'll usually hit you multiple times. And then he can actually kill you if you're not careful, because those little pink exploding things do a massive amount of damage. So once you kill the boss, you'll get XP. You'll also get whatever the boss drop item is. And then I recommend that you go around and make sure all the items that you can break are broken. Make sure that you pick up any scrap, iron, things like that that you might find. I cannot stress enough how important, especially when you are just starting the game, it is to make sure that you get all of the loot that you can. It will make your life a lot easier if you do that, because you will be able to upgrade more frequently and you'll be able to use more consumables. Like for instance, there's 2 ammo boxes that I just picked up in this fight, and if I didn't do as much damage as I did, then I might have had to use a ammo box just to keep going without having to worry about killing ads or killing those little pink exploding things to get more ammo. If there is an exit to a dungeon, you will see it on your map as a blacked out area, like a non-highlighted area, and you will also see the little pop-up that says exit. When you exit after a boss battle, most of the time there's a little chest that you can loot, so I would recommend that you loot that and once again destroy all of the breakable items that you can possibly destroy. So that's what a dungeon looks like. Then you'll be able to exit the dungeon. And this was a particular dungeon that is a through dungeon, meaning it has a starting point and it has a ending exit, which those will have you exit into either a different section of Earth, like a totally different section of the map or a totally different section of the world. There is one dungeon you must do to get to the next portion of the world, and there is one dungeon that is optional. So you will notice that now I'm on the same map that I was just at. However, I can continue to run up this way, and there will be a checkpoint crystal. But more importantly, I am on the backside of this particular gate. So now I can open this gate, and that will serve as a shortcut. There you go. You can see, the default starting area. And we'll just have our shortcut right here to this particular crystal, which you can then use the crystal and you will be restocked and healed, as well as any status effects that you have will be removed. I should mention, if you get this tree in your world, you do have two options. If you have an item from one of the later dungeons that can appear on Earth called the Twisted Mask, you can equip that and talk to the tree. If you do that, you will get the trait Barkskin. And then after you do that, you can also kill the tree for XP, or you can just go ahead and kill the tree for XP in the first place. It's completely up to you. But you'll notice that now I have the upper portion of the map exposed. I can see that, which means I only have to go south on the map, and then I'll do another dungeon, go to the next section, which will have another couple dungeons in it, and the path leading to the Root Mother, which then you'll do a couple other little odds and ends and have a path that leads to the world boss, which then will allow you to go into the next world. So hopefully I did answer all of your questions for you. Another quick tip that I can give, I would recommend that you leave your show damage on and show health bars on. Some people like to turn that off, but I don't particularly like to do that. And I would also recommend that you increase your brightness just a little bit, because there are a lot of sections in this game that tend to be dark. With that being said, as I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I will do my best to help you guys out. But hopefully you enjoyed the video, and hopefully you enjoyed the game. If by some chance you haven't picked up your copy of Remnant from the Ashes yet, there will be a link in the description where you can purchase your copy off of Amazon, and that helps support the show here. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, of course, subscribe for more content, but more importantly, stay frosty.